If you follow football, you may recall the global outrage surrounding the deaths involved in delivering the most expensive World Cup in history. It was held in Qatar back in 2022. Even to this day, it is unclear exactly how many migrant workers died since Qatar was awarded the hosting rights in 2010. The Guardian estimated this figure stood at more than 6,500 people. Qatar failed to make public any data on these deaths or investigate their causes. In fact, Qatar was in utter denial, very much like the World Cup chief executive Nasser Al-Khater, who lashed out at a journalist that death is a natural part of life.
Death is a natural part of life, whether it's at work, whether it's in your sleep.
Qatar is completely dependent on migrant labour, estimated at 2 million, making up nearly 95% of the labour force in a country of just 3 million people. A large majority of the workforce come from South Asian countries, including India, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. They leave their homes full of hope and determination, dreaming of better futures, yet they often find themselves caught in a web of deceit and suffering. The largest number of workers by far is employed in construction. Migrant workers are the backbone of Qatar's economy, but many are incredibly vulnerable. A decade ago, international trade unions submitted a complaint at the International Labour Organization, a specialized agency of the UN, against the state of Qatar. The object of the complaint was human trafficking in violation of ILO Conventions number 29 and 81 relating to forced labour and labour inspection. After a period of intense negotiations, the state of Qatar and the ILO agreed on a program to enact major labour reforms. But migrant exploitation is deep-rooted. Among migrant workers' most common grievances are non-payment or delayed payment of wages, crowded and unsanitary living conditions, and excessive working hours.
This is the life we are living here in Qatar, Doha.
Why are migrants exploited in Qatar? Part of the problem is the Kafala system. Kafala is a legal system of sponsorship. It gives employers sponsorship permits to bring in foreign workers. In Qatar, the practice dates back to the early 20th century when Kafala was created to support the pearl industry. The worker is entirely dependent on the employer for their entry and stay in the country, their job, even their exit from the country. Arguably, the system was supposed to offer protection for migrant workers. Workers coming alone into an unfamiliar place could theoretically rely on their sponsor to protect them and provide what they need. But the multiple dependencies put the worker in a situation where they're vulnerable to exploitation. Migrants' rights to fair wages, overtime pay, adequate housing, freedom of movement and access to justice are at risk. Even the migrant worker's ability to change or leave their jobs is at stake, since the migrant needs the employer's permission in the form of a no-objection certificate. Following the 2014 ILO complaint, several new laws and regulations were adopted to tackle these issues. Workers can now supposedly change jobs at any time. They no longer require an employer-approved exit permit to leave the country. Heat stress legislation was introduced to protect workers from heat stress. Per regulations, workers are not allowed to work in outdoor spaces between 10 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. from 1st of June to 15th of September. Where the temperature rises beyond 32.1 degrees Celsius, work is also prohibited. Qatar even became the first country in the Gulf region to adopt a non-discriminatory minimum wage set at 1,000 Qatari riyal, approximately $275. This is all great on paper. The reality is that a single person's estimated monthly costs in Doha are now over 3,000 Qatari riyal without rent. That's 3 times the minimum wage. The reality is that workers are still expected to work up to 32.1 degrees Celsius. Imagine a hot summer day at the beach and being expected to carry bricks in the sweltering heat. Temperatures in Qatar go up to 50 degrees Celsius and companies are reluctant to comply with the new rules. In 2021 alone, 338 companies were fined for non-compliance with the midday work ban. Workers are not guaranteed adequate rest time and worker deaths keep going unexplained. Official statistics from Qatar often attribute worker deaths to natural causes or cardiac arrest, obscuring the actual impact of heat stress. The reality is that despite scrapping the employer-approved exit permit to leave the country, employers can apply for exceptions and domestic workers are required to inform employers that they wish to leave at least 72 hours in advance. Then the reality is that even though Qatari law states that workers should not pay recruitment fees, 54% of low-wage workers continue to pay to come to Qatar. They take out huge loans at exorbitant interest rates to pay between $500 to $4,000 $1,000 depending on the agency. Bear in mind, migrants' average salary is typically $275. This crushing debt binds them into modern-day slavery. Where is Qatar falling short? The picture on the ground in no way reflects the progress on Qatar's statute books. It is true that progress was not possible while Qatari laws enabled labour abuse, but labour laws are only as good as their enforcement and the ability for workers to seek justice and compensation for their abuse. The Qatari system is still very much busy chewing and spitting out migrant workers dead or alive, just as the workers laboured in the searing heat to build over $200 billion worth of stadiums and infrastructure that made the 2022 tournament possible. Migrants continue to pay a shockingly high price for a country to be listed as the 5th richest country in the world.